Sam Sita, Emma Vigland on the Majority Report. Pleasure to welcome back to the program Mehdi Hassan, editor-in-chief and CEO of Zateo News, and a early happy birthday to Zateo, Mehdi. It's been, I can't believe it's been a year, frankly, but I have to say, Zateo has had, in my mind, I mean, at least in my consumption, but I think broadly speaking, such an impact so quickly.
In a shocking expose, Stephen Miller's dangerous rhetoric is put under the microscope. His twisted narrative about immigration and national security is not just rhetoric, it's a calculated attack on democracy and civil liberties. Join us as we dissect these outrageous claims and reveal the elite manipulation behind them.
And it's really impressive what you've been able to do over there in such a short amount of time.
Yep.
So congratulations, particularly in this environment, but really in any type of media environment. It's been really incredibly impressive.
Thank you so much, Sam. That means a lot, especially coming from you. You were one of the early adopters of independent journalism and alternative media and standing up to quote unquote MSM. So I feel very honored to get that praise from you. We are a year old. And it's amazing that we've managed to pull off a year. If you'd asked me a year ago, would we still be around a year from now? We're growing, we're expanding. We've got a big new documentary coming out next week. We're on a world tour, live city tour. We were in London. We're going to be in LA and Toronto, New York, Washington, D.C. So we're celebrating our year. But look, it's a tough time for the media right now. We have a president and a government that is openly anti-First Amendment, free speech, and the media. So, we're celebrating, but we're also cautious about the future.
Yeah. And speaking of that, President, I don't know. There seems to be some controversy, at least in my head, as to when the first 100 days is. But then I don't care. I mean, it really is just a made up measure. But this is like a measure where everybody checks in. And I don't know. Broadly speaking, what's your sense of this first 100 days?
Hard to answer that question, because on the one hand, when Trump, as he said on ABC News, well, people voted for this. This is what they wanted. He's got a point. Like, he's done a lot of the stuff that he said he would do. He said he would do tariffs and go after China. He has done that. He said he would close the border and end the right to asylum. He's done that. He said he would go after journalists and he would go after higher education, and he's done all of that. Government bureaucrats. He's done that, right? Whether we like it or not, whether we agree with it or not. Now, at the same time, it's been a crazy 100 days where he's just unrolled things that no one voted for, right? Not even his base. His base did not vote for a first quarter of negative growth or a prospect of a recession. They didn't vote for their 401ks being decimated. They didn't vote for threats of war with Denmark, Panama, and Iran. This was supposed to be the anti-war president. They didn't vote for a lot of this stuff. They certainly didn't vote for green card holders, permanent legal residents to be detained and almost deported, or U.S. citizen children, as we've seen, basically kidnapped and removed from their own country, a 4-year-old with cancer, as happened last week. So none of that was on the ballot box for sure. So look, the one thing, giving me some hope is that the American people have turned quite quickly against him, quicker than against any previous president in their 100 days. He's the most unpopular president at this point in the 100-day cycle. He's had the worst stock market performance for 100 days, going back to Richard Nixon. He's underwater, not just on the economy in terms of polling, which is an issue he led on, but on immigration too, which was supposed to be his secret weapon and the Democrats' Achilles heel. Not quite.
Well, yeah, those immigration numbers, that's news to some Democrats like Chuck Schumer, who would rather focus on the car tax that is really affecting the suburbanites that he so covets. Like, I mean, what has been your reaction, Mehdi, to seeing this? What'd you say, Sam?
Hell no.
Hell no. This split between the Democrats and, I mean, Slotkin, I would say, and Schumer are on this side of just kitchen table issues. They never identify what the kitchen table issues are. They just say we shouldn't be talking about trans people and immigration. But it appears that the Kilmar Abrego Garcia case in particular has hurt Donald Trump in polling just as much as inflation and cost of living and the tariffs, which we're now beginning to see the effects of. There was an article in CNN about how Trump last night allowed the de minimis exemption on goods under $800 to expire. And there was a stat in that nearly 50% of de minimis packages are shipped to the poorest counties in the entire country. Like, that is going to they're going to start to feel those effects. But the immigration stuff, that's clearly a major part of what's driving his approval rating falling apart.
So, yeah, let's just take both of those issues. Very interesting, immigration and the economy, how Democrats approach, because he's underwater on both. And these are, I will remind your viewers, two issues he has consistently led on. When he was in opposition, when he was in power, as frustrating as I find it, he's led on the economy, even though he has no economic policy to talk of. And yet, look at immigration, where, yes, he's doing, people love his border security, but Kilmar Brigo Garcia was the single most unpopular issue that the New York Times Siena poll found him on just a couple of weeks ago. And Democrats were saying, oh, no, we should stay away from this. Republicans were like, it's an 80-20 issue. Democrats are on the wrong side. Yet Chris Van Hollen had the guts to go out there. Maxwell Frost went out there. Other Democrats made a song and dance. Peter Welch of Vermont went and visited Mohsen Madavi in prison before he was released this week, right? And there were other Democrats just cowering, crouching in that classic defensive posture saying, we can't win on this issue. These are unpopular people. Actually, it turns out the American people are outraged when you tell them what is going on, when their rights and due process are being undermined and the Supreme Court 9-0 is being ignored. So Democrats can lead on that issue. The other issue, Emma, that you mentioned, which is, kitchen table issues, ironically, that's an issue where Democrats don't actually need to say much, right? Because you don't need Democrats to tell you that you're hurting or that prices are up. You can see that on your own. You don't actually need Democrats to do that much. Donald Trump's doing all the damage to himself. These are all self-inflicted wounds. He inherited a very strong economy with 2.4% growth in the last quarter of 2024. And now he gave us minus 0.3% in the first quarter of 2025. And then he says dumb shit like, I don't know if you saw him this week in the Oval Office saying, well, if they have $30, they can have $2 and they can pay a couple bucks more for it. First of all, who is Trump hanging out with other than Barron, who has $30, right? I have two kids. I have two kids. They do not have $30. And if they do, I'm outraged about it. I'm going to go double check. But I'm pretty sure I didn't buy them $30, certainly not in one go, for a couple of bucks more. So this is just this ridiculous stance that he's taken where he's completely out of touch with the American people and his own base on some of this stuff. So I actually think it's the reverse of the kind of slot consumer. I actually think the economy takes care of itself right now, and they should focus on the due process, the Supreme Court, the American citizens, children. By the way, the Republican Party claims to be the anti-child trafficking party. They are literally trafficking American citizen children out of this country to Honduras. Insane. A child with cancer.
I couldn't agree more, particularly about those, the two sequencing and how, on some level, what Van Hollen and Frost and et al. Have shown is that you can take an issue like this, and particularly when it's so egregious, and change that polling. That's the thing that Democrats seem to be allergic to. I don't know if it's a function of the consultant class or whatnot, but how they, there are, this is a target-rich environment, as they say. Let's play this clip of Stephen Miller in the, I don't know where he was yesterday. It was a White House briefing room.
Yeah.
In this instance, he is Chiron or labeled the Homeland Security Advisor. He seems to be the advisor on just about everything with Donald Trump. He really does seem to be the number, really the number two guy. I'm sure there's 100%. Sort of some type of like Wiles and he are, both seem to have access to the White House at any time of the day. I should say the Oval Office. Here is Stephen Miller.
Most of your papers never covered her story when it happened. To the extent that you covered it at all, it was because President Trump forced you to cover it by highlighting it repeatedly over and over again. He had to shame you into covering it. And each and every one of you that sides over and over again with these MS-13 terrorists, to the extent that you have the financial means to do so, you all choose to live in condos or homes or houses as far away from these kinds of gangbangers as you possibly can.
This is a distortion of reality. Miller's rhetoric is designed to incite fear and division. By painting immigrants as gangbangers, he manipulates public perception, diverting attention from the real issues at hand, systemic inequality, and elite interests that benefit from this chaos.
If I offered any one of you a rent-free home with no taxes to pay in any of these gang neighborhoods, and I said your neighbors are MS-13 terrorists or Mexican mafia or Sinaloa cartel or Tren de Aragua, I couldn't pay you to live there. But yet you, with your coverage, are trying to force innocent Americans to have these people as their neighbors and that one day their daughter may be abducted from their home and raped and murdered. So you're not going to get an ounce of sympathy from this administration or President Trump for the terrorists who've invaded our homes and our country.
You know what's amazing to me about, I mean, just aside from how sort of fascistic-y he is, but this whole thing where we have terrorist cells in the country, an invading army, and we haven't had one shootout yet with ICE officials and these invading terrorists.
So true.
It's
What's
because of
going
the wokeness under Biden. They prevented that kind of thing from happening, right?
They took all the guns away. No, somebody said that recently. One of the many innocent people whose homes were raided recently said, what if I had a gun? These ICE people are turning up with no ID, their faces behind masks, grabbing people on the streets, grabbing people outside churches, grabbing people in courthouses. It is amazing that no one has actually pulled a gun in the United States of America. This is the Don't Tread on Me party, the right to bear arms, the Second Amendment folks, the stand your ground people in Florida, right? If somebody comes up to you in the street and just grabs you with no ID, why wouldn't you defend yourself by any means necessary? It's amazing. Thank God we've avoided that. But yes, as you point out, if these really were all gangbangers and terrorists, wouldn't they put up a fight when they're being deported rather than, for example, that horrifying video of the Turkish student in Massachusetts who's picked up by a group of masked men and is just screaming and crying because she's a young woman being pulled off the street in the middle of Ramadan, right? That is who they're pulling off the streets, these cowards in masks. So you're right. It is insane. Stephen Miller is a liar. He's a white supremacist. He's the worst kind of white supremacist.
This is a call to action. Miller's influence in the Trump administration represents a dangerous normalization of hate. His manipulative tactics are aimed at consolidating power by stoking fear, revealing how the elite prey on societal divisions to maintain their grip on authority.
A Jewish white supremacist. His own family have disowned him, right? His Jewish family, his uncle famously wrote a piece saying, Stephen Miller, we all can't stand you and our family wouldn't be in the US if people have brought in the kind of immigration laws you want. When he talks about living in areas with gang members and terrorists, well, why don't they go find these areas? Because they don't seem to be able to find any Tren de Aragua people. The people they sent to El Salvador, vast majority of them were not gang members or Tren de Aragua. And by the way, a Trump judge in Texas just this week said there's no invasion. Like the whole premise of the Alien Enemies Act, 1798, that Miller invoked is Miller's idea. He's the guy who talked about it in during the campaign, and they've now implemented it. Was that there is an invasion by a foreign power. No one believes that Tren de Aragua is part of the Venezuelan government. U.S. intelligence internally told the State Department it's not part of the Venezuelan government. There is no invasion by any commonly understood definition of the term, certainly not a legal one. So a Trump judge has thrown out the idea of using the Alien Enemies Act. But look, Miller was a crazy, kooky gadfly working for Jeff Sessions on the Hill. He used to get ignored by other Republican staffers who thought he was a weirdo. And now, as you say, Sam, he's the second most powerful person in the White House.
This is a wake-up call. The ascendance of individuals like Miller shows us how far the elite will go to undermine democracy. By placing extremists in power, they create a narrative that justifies authoritarianism, stripping away our rights under the guise of national security.
He's basically running all policy as deputy chief of staff. He's coming up with these ideas. He's filling Trump's head with nonsense, right? Trump's head is already filled with nonsense. But when you see Trump on ABC saying they had MS-13 written on his knuckles, that came from Miller, surely. When he says, oh, my people told me that I won at the Supreme Court, not lost, that's Stephen Miller.
We saw him on camera, I think, making that argument in like some type of like press gaggle where he announces it and nobody
in the Oval Office.
It was just, in the Oval Office, and nobody says, well, wait a second, what are you talking about?
Why don't Democrats go big on Miller? Like, if I want to talk about messaging, if I'm a Democrat, I would do all my ad campaign around the real shadow president. This freak, just play ads of him speaking. No serious American, no independent voter, no moderate conservative looks at Stephen Miller and thinks that's a normal dude. And if you remember in the first term, SNL did that great parody ongoing about Steve Bannon being the real president and Donald Trump as Alec Baldwin sitting at the kiddie table. Trump went nuts and fired Bannon. I think they need to do the same thing with Miller, that Miller is the real president and Trump is just his puppet.
Well, I mean, I think, because in part too, I would say, is because Musk, who had been sort of the first lightning rod of the administration, seems to be stepping back because he's a special advisor, and also because he has, I think, completely effed up even the plan of his cohorts. I mean, I think it was, he was claiming that he had $150 billion worth of savings. This is not cuts, incidentally, savings that are projected in 2026. And some conservative think tank came out and said it's actually closer to like $5 billion. So we've gone from $2 trillion of fraud and waste to 1.5 down to 600 billion, down to $150 billion in savings, not fraud and waste, down to $5 billion. But in the meantime, he's wreaked complete havoc. Now, and I'm curious from a
25 million people might die in the next 15 years, according to the Lancer, because of his cuts to USAID.
And I mean, let's also be clear in terms of like what the implications are going to be for things like NIH grants and research grants. I mean, this is stuff that's going to ripple through. This is like that, Bruce Lee kidney punch where 3 weeks later you die and you don't realize. I mean, this is going to have ripple effects.
I agree.
But what do you make of the they're like, we're now about to, it seems to me, go into phase 2. If you had folks like Russell Vogt with the plan of Project 2025, which he had been developing over the past, like really 3 or 4 years, and all of the Schedule F stuff that they even attempted to do at the end of the first Trump administration, he was unable in many respects to implement that at first because Doge got in the way. The Doge process has been basically just annihilated by the courts. And now we're about to go into it seems to me, the reduction in force process that Vogt had been working on, that I imagine is a lot more thought out in terms of like where legal challenges would come from.
Yes, I agree with that. I think Russell Vogt is a much smarter and more dangerous enemy of liberalism and social democracy and the government apparatus as we know it. He has been planning it for years. He is a smart guy. He was head of Office of Management and Budget in the first term. He led he was one of the brains behind Project 2025. He's caught on camera talking about how they've tested stuff with the courts, right down to even putting military on the streets. I mean, Russell Vogt is the guy who was on tape talking about, well, we've advised President Trump what he could do with the military. So it is much more dangerous than this ridiculous Elon Musk, who has screwed up both his Doge and Tesla, by the way, while he's been busy doing Doge. His own Tesla board, according to the Wall Street Journal, were trying to headhunt a replacement for him. You've got all these ridiculous kids he employed. I don't know if you saw Jesse Waters on Fox did a puff piece last night where they all sat around the table with Big Balls or whatever his name is and all the rest of these children and bragged about how much they've done. They've done nothing, as you just pointed out with the numbers. The whole thing is a ruse, is a distraction. Musk turned up at the cabinet wearing 2 hats to make a joke about how many hats he has. He's literally the unfunniest man I've ever come across in my adult life. Like, whatever you think about Donald Trump, I will admit right here on live TV, I've laughed occasionally when Donald Trump has said things, right? I've never laughed or smiled at anything Elon Musk has ever said. He's so desperate to be the cool kid, to get the affection, he's got none of it. He's just a complete charisma-free, unfunny narcissist.
He did legalize comedy again, though, so that was good. We got
until he then shadow banned all the accounts who criticized him. Just on the Doge thing, by the way, like, it's so important to point out, to go back to your first question about the 100 days. Jonathan Shea wrote a piece for The Atlantic in which he made the very valid point that compared to FDR, who invented the whole 100-day concept and did so much legislating in the first 100 days, Trump has passed no real bills or acts of any consequence. He's passed fewer laws than he passed in his own first 100 days in 2017. But that's not really the point, right? Trump is not about legislating. He's about executive ordering. He's about doging. He's about court ignoring. And in that sense, the first 100 days have been hugely consequential. They have been hugely destructive. And you make a very valid point. Can you undo some of the stuff, the damage they've done to our scientific base, our public health, the NIH? Maybe that can't be undone at this point. The damage they've done to USAID, I doubt the Democrats are going to come back and rebuild our aid budget from scratch. I wish, but I doubt they'll do that. So some of the damage that they're doing, they know they've moved that Overton window very quickly in the 100 days to a point where even if they lose the next election, if we have a free and fair election, is the next Democratic president going to come in and make one of his priorities rebuilding some of these kind of unsexy, unfashionable areas of public life that they have just decimated? And I think that's what they've cynically realized to be true.
it's much easier to break than it is to build. Yes. And this is how Republicans have operated. They're just doing it at an even more breakneck speed. And it's also an example of how liberalism has been incapable of responding to fascism, because oftentimes liberalism is about maintaining our institutions. And when you get a Republican that comes in and breaks it, the baseline of maintenance keeps going down, and then we're at this like complete corroded period where you can have fascists take advantage of it. And there's this eugenicist thrust that is perhaps the most disturbing piece of this administration. When you mentioned how many people are going to die because with those USAID cuts, the RFK Jr. and the gutting of the research funding also has eugenicist aims domestically towards people with disabilities and disease, where RFK Jr. will have this like faux sympathy towards those kinds of people. But you look just like it's very right underneath the surface, the disgust for people with autism, the disgust for people with disabilities, and the idea that like if you can't solve it with your personal consumption choices and buy my supplements, then it's survival of the fittest. And that's part of what I think the ramifications are going to be over the next 4 years and beyond.
I mean, Donald Trump has talked about his obsession with genes, right? That's on the record for many, many, many years. He's obsessed with good genes and his own genes, which I don't think are so good. It's so funny when you talk about survival of the fittest, and yet the MAGA base is a very unfit, very ill base. If you look at any of the areas where Trump is strongest, they are places that are beset by obesity and diabetes and ill health and lack of access to healthcare. So it's like COVID, Emma, all over again, where, the study showed that disproportionately Republican voters died at disproportionately higher rates than Democratic voters because they believed the bullshit about not taking vaccines, not wearing masks, not socially distancing. So they were killing off parts of their own base, which was insane, but they did it. So yes, I mean, look, they don't give a shit. I mean, the fundamental premise of everything Donald Trump does is he does not give a shit. That is the framing of all our conversations. He only cares about himself. His family are doing a new crypto deal, I believe, in the United Arab Emirates. They're doing another deal in Qatar. They're doing deals all over the place. He's about enriching himself, keeping himself out of prison, and taking revenge against his enemies. I mean, there's no 4D chess here. Let's just be clear about that. Not from a Trump perspective. Forget Russ vote. I'm talking about Trump.
I mean, is there? I mean, on some level, though, because you make the last night the de minimis tariffs kicked back in from China, that is going to hit low income people the most. I think it was like Emma had said earlier. It was like 45% of those.
48%, yeah.
Low income people, and then about 22% higher income. But there's havoc is being wreaked in the economy. I mean, it's just no other way to say it. Like, there's no, if you're, it's all anecdotal at this point, except for, of course, the negative growth, which is clear. That shows people panicking, buying early. The story that comes out today in Rolling Stone about the White House, people working there are hoarding toilet paper because they're anticipating potential supply shocks. We'll have a better sense of this, I think, in the next 2 to 6 weeks. But this is where things could go really sideways. I mean, we have the first person fired from the administration. Granted, it was because Laura Loomer said so, but there also must be some pressure there too. So it feels like we may be on the precipice of just, which is going to make folks like Russell Vogt be much more aggressive. It seems to me like a cornered rat type of mentality.
To borrow a line from the late Donald Rumsfeld, it's a known unknown, right? We know that there's some shit coming down the track, especially in relation to the economy, because he's done such crazy stuff. We don't quite know what it is. We don't know what the repercussions will be and how they'll play out. I mean, Donald Trump could be remembered as the first president not just to be impeached twice, but to deprive of us toilet paper twice. And that would be quite a legendary achievement for himself if that's what we end up with, panic buying and empty shelves. Look, it's going to be fascinating to see a kind of Marie Antoinette, let them eat bread, let them buy $2, not 30, as people panic buy over, 4th of July weekend, or when we hit Christmas and there are no toys because every toy company says they're going to go bust. It'll be fascinating to see how Trump, the man who lives in a golden apartment in New York, how he reacts to this kind of self-inflicted recession. Now, they're going to blame Biden. He's already said that even Q2 of growth, he's going to blame on Joe Biden, which is amazing because A year ago, when the stock market was doing very well, he said it's my stock market. It's a Trump stock market, not Biden. But when he's actually president and the stock market's collapsing, it's Biden's stock market. So I think even the thickest members, the dumbest members of the MAGA cult, surely will see through that at some point. Maybe I'm being crazy, but you're right. There is a lot of stuff coming down the track at home and abroad. I mean, there's a lot of pressure. You saw the Hegseth tweet this week about attacking Iran. I mean, this was supposed to be the anti-war president, the guy who went to Michigan and said, don't vote for Harris and Cheney. They'll kill lots of Muslims. I'm the anti-war guy. And here he is threatening Iran to be bombed like it's never been bombed before. The Mike Waltz shift was supposed to be, the neocon guy. But look, guess who's running all foreign policy now in the administration? Marco Rubio. I think he's got like 4 jobs right now: Secretary of State, National Security Advisor, acting administrator of USAID, and National Archivist. So this is Rubio, the guy who once mocked Donald Trump's manhood, called him a con man. He is now basically the guy lumped with all this. And we know that Rubio is a hawk.
Yep. 100%. I mean, this is, I don't know. This is, I think, an administration where, day 200 is going to be far more telling, I think, than where we are now. And I think it's going to go in a couple of different directions. The national economy may go south, but Trump's family economy, I think, is going to do quite well. I think this is going to be we're going to see like the mentality of everybody get into the getaway car, because I think they're going to realize by next fall, they're going to lose the House. By all accounts.
But I think that
the manipulation runs deep, and it's time we recognize it. Stephen Miller and his ilk are not just fringe characters. They are the embodiment of a systemic effort to dismantle our freedoms. As we witness this unfolding crisis, we must ask ourselves, what are we willing to fight for? Share your thoughts below.